Quite a few people on board. Hey, well, welcome fellow PMI team members and others in the community. This is Brian Russell. I'm your Lunch and Learn coordinator for the local PMI chapter. Hey, today we have our good friend Yuquan Holloway, who will be presenting again. If you had attended a session last spring, Yuquan presented as well to the team at that point. So today, Yuquan's going to be presenting on Keep Your Stakeholders Close. A little bit about Yuquan. She leads Holloway Consulting Group, and that's a consulting practice focused on helping technology teams set goals, create plans, and solve complex problems. She has spent 18 plus years driving successful change in the information technology and supply chain arena for a Fortune 100 company. She's also a part-time instructor at Kennesaw State University, teaching information systems management. And throughout her career, Yuquan is focused on driving a culture of standard work, repeatable processes, stabilizing and simplifying core applications, reducing critical incidents, and delivering technology projects. She graduated from Georgia Institute of Technology with a bachelor's of civil engineering and holds an MBA from Georgia State University. In addition to her success as a leader in the fields of business and IT, she has a personal passion for education and volunteers with youth groups. She often facilitates workshops and teaches classes on project management and process improvement. So again, welcome, Yuquan. Looking forward to your presentation today.
Thank you.
Just stop sharing. Oh, you've got the screen share up, so excellent. To the attendees, so at some point after the presentation, usually a few days later, you'll get an email from the PMI with a copy of the presentation and instructions on how to report the PDU for this session. So be watching for a PMI email for that. It's usually 4 to 5 days after the session. In addition, in the right-hand menu on your hop-in screen, there is a session Q&A that we will use for any feedback. Yuquan in the presentation will be asking for feedback during the presentation, so use the Q&A portion for your written feedback, and then I will relay it to Yuquan, just any content that's in there. So with that, Yuquan, let's learn about keeping your stakeholders close.
Yes, keep them very, very close. So thank you guys so much for having me again. And as you were reading my intro, Brian, it's always interesting to hear it, because then you learn, I'm like, oh yeah. I realized I haven't went to one Georgia school that's won a championship since 92, I think, was Georgia Tech's big claim to fame. So our in-state rivals, of course, are the Georgia Dogs. And they already were a group of belligerent and loud people. So you can imagine how difficult it is with them having won the national championship. But at least Alabama didn't win again, right? That's what I keep saying to myself. And so thank you for having me.
I saw the game. It was a well-deserved win, for sure.
It was a well-deserved win. We'll give it to them. I am excited to talk to you today about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I also, get to share a little bit about what I do. And I love Lean Six Sigma because I'm not a born organized person. I have to really work at having systems and processes. And once I latch on to one, I love it. And I think it helps me live. And I studied Lean Six Sigma about 16 years ago and got to apply it a lot at Coca-Cola. And I also, at around the same time in my life, started working as a manager, and I have PMP as well. I'm just blending the concept to drive effective results. I think they fit nicely together. I think Lean gives us tools within the project management framework to help us tease some things out. And so that's what I get to share with you more about today. And last time you guys made it a conversation, so I'm excited about it being a conversation this time too, and not just me preaching at you. Specifically today, we're going to talk about ways to keep our, in Lean Six Sigma terms, I'd say suppliers and customers, ways to think about them carefully, ways to engage them, and ways to help manage them throughout the project. And I almost don't want to think that I'm managing people. I'm managing a project, but I do want to give a lot of intentional thought to the people that are in the project and the people that are impacted by the project. And as us project managers know, those are our stakeholders. And so today we'll talk about ways to keep them engaged and informed so that they don't inform us, for lack of better words. So that's the conversation. And I'm just going to share mostly one tool on how I like to make sure I'm thinking of all of my stakeholders. And that you'll see that, of course, is the SIPOC, my paperclip. That's what I like to call my SIPOC. So why stakeholder management? Why is that, enough to talk about? We have so many things when it comes to managing a project. But I think one of the things I heard many years ago, and I hold it close, I think I heard it at the seminar that I was at when I met Brian many moons back, was if your stakeholders don't think you're doing well, you're not doing well. If your customers aren't satisfied with the result of what you've delivered, then they're not satisfied. And I can't tell you, I can tell you how many times you put your heart and soul into something, you do a really good job and hours, but because one or two or three people don't agree or see it as the same, even if it's what you said you were going to deliver, you've lost it. You've lost them, and it hasn't been a good job. So nothing like being derailed by a stakeholder that's gone kind of rogue. I don't even want to call them rogue, but it can happen. So we're going to bring them back. Come towards the light, Caroline. My mom likes to say that. Towards the light, Caroline. For those of you that watch horror, I don't. It's just so important that we manage our stakeholders carefully. Another reason I think it's even more important in today's time is because of our communication streams. We have so many different ways that we can communicate. And just like we do, so do our people. So do the people that we're managing. So do our stakeholders, our suppliers and customers of whatever it is we're delivering. And so they could start complaining on Instagram. They could complain on Facebook. They could complain via whatever inner office tools they might be using, like Yammer, email, phone, text message, website. There's so many different ways that our stakeholders can communicate about their dislike or dissatisfaction with something, that it just multiplies very quick, and things that are small can sometimes feel like they're getting out of control. So that's why I want to talk about stakeholder management. And that's why I say, keep them close, right? Keep them close, especially the ones that you don't want to keep close. Keep them closer. So sideswiped. I mean, how many of us have been sideswiped? Now, this is a cute little car. You're driving the tour bus here. Your project is, it's a big thing. It's going along. It's doing well. And all of a sudden, something comes out of nowhere, something you didn't expect at all. You thought you had everything pulled together and everything was in a nice little box. And then here comes this little Ferrari speeding from down the street, and you didn't see it coming. And it gets a little banged up too, as you can see from the picture, but you take some damage too, right? You might have to slow down a bit. You thought everything was going at a great cadence, but now you need to pause, explain to everybody what's going on, why. You start having to play defense and working to rebuild a little bit of confidence. And so I think there's a poll for us of how many times have we been sideswiped while we're doing a project.
In the session tab, you guys could jump over to the session tab on the right menu, click on polls, and there's a question there. Have you ever been sideswiped on a program?
And so sideswipe being You know, everything was going along just fine. And here comes Brenda from accounting. She asks one little question and she unravels everything. And it might be a valid question, and it might not even be a valid question. It all depends, right, on who she is and what type of, I like to call it, personal power she has. I'm a vote too.
All and right. Quan, in your photo there of the Ferrari and the tour bus, it looks like the Ferrari got the worst of that deal.
It did, but you know, the Ferrari did get. So for those of you not sure, I want to talk about that a little bit more, about what I mean by sideswipe. So I'm glad you had that as a poll answer. Sideswipe meaning you had everything was on plan. You felt like you were delivering a great product. You felt like your project was going to be great and everything was working as designed. And then all of a sudden, something happened, whether it was somebody came along and said, hey, you haven't considered the feedback or input from this specific department. We're very important in this. Or, you know, that job really doesn't happen within this organization. It goes over to that team and they should have been a part of this. So they weren't a part of this. So now we need to take a pause and look at everything anew. So that's kind of what I mean by sideswiped. Just, you thought things were going a certain way, but things changed because you didn't have everything together like you thought. And the only point of this, it's not enough to manage your project task, which it seems like that should be enough. You also have to manage your stakeholders well and make sure that you have a well-laid plan for managing them. And for most of us, we understand typical change management, and that's not an issue. We sometimes struggle in making sure that we have considered all of the right stakeholders. So any questions or comments about that before we talk a little bit about lessons from conventional change management? And I fumble a little there to go back and forth, but I think I got it.
Yeah, I didn't see any commentary in the Q&A. But yeah, folks, if you have any stories about being sideswiped, you know, feel free to add your commentary in the Q&A.
All right. So we're all pretty understand the basics of change management. And if we don't, I have a couple of slides just to talk about change management in general. And here you see an umbrella, and you know, you got your stakeholders. If they're kind of in light blue, so you might not see them, but they're all under this umbrella together, and there's change that's about to happen to them. They're about to be rained upon just a bit, and we have to change some things. And so our stakeholders have to understand why they must change. That you'll hear people use the terminology sometimes. What's the burning platform for change? Or this, I guess we didn't want to set people on fire. So instead, we gave them rain, which is more apropos for today's world and climate. And there's threats and opportunities coming from the outside, and we have to prove it and get them to the point where they're ready and starting to prepare for change. So they have to know what's in it for them, why it's important, and why they need to change. Additionally, you know, they have to go through the whole process of being okay with the change. I mean, this is normal and natural for all of us. Sometimes when I have a major change happening, I will look at the stages to see, okay, what stage am I in, and how do I just get myself through to the other side as quick as possible. I also do that with grief sometimes. So that's weird. I'll Google what are the 7 stages of grief, so I can go ahead and just try to hack my way through a little bit faster. But first, of course, they're unaware. The stakeholder is unaware of the change, and then they're a bit resistant. There's a time when they're neutral, right down there at the danger zone. That's, you know, but you're trying to push them up to being supportive. And then you want them to be, you'll hear the term for some, leading, like they want to help you with the change. Those are your best stakeholders, right? But You got to get them from unaware to resistant to neutral, supportive, and then leading. We are in danger if we are near the end of an effort and we have stakeholders who are still unaware because we didn't identify them properly as a stakeholder. And it's way more, it's easier and better to get our stakeholders engaged sooner rather than later so that we can take them along the journey and so that we can involve them in the change. We'll have a much better solution if we have the right people engaged all the way throughout. So this is just saying there's levels of stakeholder engagement, right? And we all know that, but our problem happens if we don't, not that we don't take them through the change, but we don't even recognize them as somebody that we should engage in the change, in this whole stakeholder effort. And then I just have a list of different types of stakeholders. I think it's important to keep these types of categories of stakeholders in your mind or somewhere in a note, so that when you are taking a look at your project work, if it's not a large enough project that you're going to have a dedicated change management resource and you're the de facto change lead because it's not going to be that huge of a change, I think it's a good idea, as I'm thinking about my stakeholders, to ask myself, are any of these stakeholders a part of the change that I'm about to lead? If I haven't heard their names come up, I probably should ask. For example, I'm working with a clinic, and as we're talking about opening a service for a new client group, so right now they deal with sexually transmitted diseases, right? And they want to expand and include youth. And that doesn't sound like it should be controversial because they have youth that show up and need testing. But it is controversial because there's all kinds of rules about how you interact with minors, without their parents, and with their parents. And it differs in different states, as you could imagine, like we do everything else in our country, right? So it differs in different states, and they operate in different states. And so as we're thinking through our stakeholders, boy, government is a huge one for us, and making sure that we are very clear on the requirements of the government at the federal level and at the state level. So that's our elephant sitting in the room that we may not be able to see. But as we were talking about setting up a new service, we were just talking about it as if it were, just set up a new service. And as I'm thinking through this, I'm like, excuse me, what role does the government play? Because I don't know. And they're like, whoa, that's big. The government plays a big role. We need to start talking to different people in our organization to know exactly what, and we need to engage our council. So it's just an example of, not an example, but just a slide of people, categories of stakeholders that might be important for your project. And if you design and wait to the end before you think about this stakeholder group, you could find yourself having to do rework or, wasting some time that you should have taken at the very top. All right. So how do we make sure that we're considering all of the right people as stakeholders so that we don't leave anybody out? And it can be, tasks like this can be sometimes a little difficult in that we can get very myopic and we're working with the same group of people. Often when we're tasked with a project, we know our project sponsor and we know all the people that are project team members, of which we might be one or we might be the project lead. And then sometimes you have your business or IT team that's assigned, and you start to work with those people and you think, okay, I got all the right people in the room, and we all just go with that. But I like to use a SIPOC, and I know I've gotten to share this with you guys a couple of times about a SIPOC and what a SIPOC is. And so I'll just pause here, and I know it's not the best eye chart, but I like it, and I can share it later as well. Well, I will share this as well. But a SIPOC is just a mnemonic supplier. And you guys have probably done these before. And if not, you've seen one before. It's not a Star Trek character. It's just a mnemonic for a tool. And I like to use this to bound a project, but I also like to use it to make sure that I'm very clear on the stakeholders of a project, because my suppliers to the process and my customers of whatever it is we're doing, they are my stakeholders, the S and the C. And so if we take our time and flesh out a SIPOC, sometimes as we build out the picture, we'll notice somebody sitting in the S that we did not consider a stakeholder. And it's a great thing to notice them early rather than later, because a stakeholder is anybody that can impact or be impacted by the project. They need to know that you've made a change. And they may be responsible for giving you a huge, important input. And if you don't bring them along the ride, you might not get what you need.
This looks like a great tool to be used in conjunction with your stakeholder analysis.
Yes.
In fact, at Blue Cross, we use a SIPOC tool similar to what you're showing here pretty often to really help break down processes, make sure we understand what's happening in a process. So yeah, this is awesome. Glad that you shared the SIPOC model.
Yeah, I like to work mine backwards, and I'll share another example of it. And even after the team has built it, when I go and I talk to various stakeholders and I share it with them, they'll always point out something that the team didn't know or didn't see or just totally forgot, because they're working the process from a little bit of a different perspective. And they might share with us something very, very critical and key. I have lots of SIPOCs. This is just an example of a process for leave administration, right? We're just trying to make sure we have a good, I think this was for a client right at the top of COVID. They really needed to get a good handle on how they managed leave. But we put it in a SIPOC to say, okay, who are all the customers of the leave process? And so I like to work mine from the back to from the C all the way back to the S. What are the outputs that all of these customers need? They need notification of leave approval. They need their leave pay benefits. They need their direct pay premiums to be collected. So some whole HR terms, right? And then, well, what are the inputs that help that process runs? And then who supplies those inputs? And so as we pull this together, you're like, this third party in our supplier column, they need to be a part of this conversation, because a lot of the processes we're using are really processes that they have. They aren't necessarily processes that we run. We don't have all the right people at the table. But I picked a random SIPOC because I could share that with any SIPOC example. And then I just want to also share with you this tool. This is truly in my head how I question people as I am working through a process, this process definition slide. These are the questions that I'm asking, the ones that are at the bottom. Who are the users of this output? What are their expectations? Are their expectations currently being met? And then all the way, who supplies the input? So I'm working this, and I just wanted to share questions. And before I share it with you guys, I'll share it again, is my dog, my feeding the dog example. We can do a SIPOC on almost anything until I saw this one, which I'm sure I probably got off the internet. I never thought of my back feeding process, because it's getting nutrients in. Maybe I should think about feeding my dog a little bit healthier food if the garden is truly a real customer. But we don't have a garden here. But if we did, maybe it's something I consider. So just a little bit about leveraging a SIPOC. And then to Brian's point, I'm going to talk a little bit about stakeholder analysis. Any questions, thoughts, or ways that you've used a SIPOC to truly understand who all of your customers or suppliers, i.e. stakeholders, are.
If you have anything to share, you use the Q&A portion on the session.
All right. Well, I hope you're paying close attention, because there's a bit of a, what George will call a virtual experience at the end to catch your knowledge in this area. All right. So stakeholder analysis, once you know who they are, then you can analyze them, right? That's what we're really trying to get. We're not just knowing our stakeholders for knowing them sake, but we really want to analyze them and understand them. We want to understand their influence. Like, I meant to share at the top about a project I had back in October. I was going live in October. I worked on something for about 4 months, and it's simple. It was a ServiceNow configuration to handle some in-house provisioning of a tool. So we're going to use ServiceNow's workflow capability. And I talked to all of the different functions in the business who rely on, who want to control who gets access to their various applications. I talked to the business. I talked to IT and the people that do the process. And some of them were a little half-hearted, but hey, they're busy. What I didn't really pay attention to was that the 2 women that actually do this work and did this role had done it for 20 years. And they were responsible for all of the provisioning, and they made the decisions. The business kind of deferred relegated them to make decisions, and they liked it. And I didn't realize they liked it. And they were suspect of a tool taking the knowledge that they had built up over those years. And I didn't pay attention to their influence in this space, because everybody trusted them to do it. So if I would have known their influence was high. And what is important to the stakeholder, in the moment when I got sideswiped, I would have said control was important. But stepping back a couple of weeks after everything got delayed and kind of tweaked, I realized what was very important to those 2 women was that it was done well and it was done right. They took safeguarding the company's security very personal. How could they contribute to the project? They should have been my direct team members on this project. This should have been their main project. Instead, I let the vice president assign me somebody who was new, and I didn't question, but I would have brought them in a lot closer. And then how could they inhibit the project? Well, when it was time to go live, they threw up all kind of red flags. They sent emails, they sent rhythms inside of ServiceNow, all kinds of stuff. And strategy for engaging the stakeholder. We're going live with phase 2 next week. And I was meeting with them earlier today, and I have held them very, very close. I brought them in, I made them members of the project team, and really learned a lot from them. And this second phase of what we're about to deliver is going to be so much better than what we did in the first phase. Shame on me for not digging a little deeper when I came up with the first plan and allowed everybody to just bless it along this way without really digging and understanding their organization a bit more. So once you know who they are, you can analyze them better and fix those types of mistakes. And then I showed you this type of stakeholder analysis tool, which is just a spreadsheet with some columns, right? And then this is another type. This actually has some little coding behind the scenes where we're looking at Batman, Robin, and the Joker right here. But how are they currently? Are they strongly against the changes to Gotham City, or are they for it, right? And where do I need them to be? And then this prioritizes the gap between where they are now and where they need to be to show you who might need a little special love and attention. Of course, the Joker needs a lot of love and attention, but I would have...
So true.
I would have really, if I would have done this on this project that I'm sharing with you, I would have noticed that those 2 really wasn't going along for the ride. They were in name only because of meetings I was having, and the vice president was in the room. So they smiled along until it was all said and done. And I like to get at stuff like that with a survey at the start, segmenting the survey up by those stakeholder groups that we might have seen in the SIPOC, and keeping it anonymous, but still seeing if I see any trends of supportive or how people currently feel before I get started, so that I can assess, or with direct interviews, if people are open and truthful in interviews one-on-one, then I can pretty much gauge where my stakeholders are about the work. I can't gauge how they feel about the work truly in large groups, especially if they're not the most senior person, or if their feeling is a bit controversial, they might not be as willing to share. So I need to know how they feel, though. I need to know who they are, and I need to know how they feel. All right. And then before we go to our virtual activity, I want to just talk about a few ways I found to engage stakeholders. And I love your input here on ways that you found to engage stakeholders. And of course, if I need to keep them very close because they are a stakeholder that I feel could wander off on a beaten path, or they have a lot of influence and they could cause issues with what's going on, and they don't really like the project per se, but they were told it was going to happen, I like to make those people a part of the team. And it can be it could be harder sometimes in the beginning, but in the beginning is where the foundation gets set and they start to buy in, or maybe some of their reservations are really, really important things that we need to be considering in the first place. So I like to bring them onto the team if possible. For some stakeholders, depending on how I assess them, I might decide to do one-on-one check-ins. I had a guy once before that I had to do a meeting before the meeting. And I was like, this is really painful, but I got to do this meeting for the meeting, or he'll derail the meeting. And there was just no way around it. And I learned a lot from him. So it, wasn't wasted time. Sometimes I'll do a little special focus group of people and bring them in different spaces throughout the project to just kind of do a bit of a show and tell. This is where we are. This is where we're going. They don't have the time to be a part of the meeting, but they need to be engaged, and I'll get better results from them if I have them engaged. Email, having a consistent routine, and I say that a little bit below, a consistent routine around communications or an email. And I'll have sometimes a routine where I'll say, hey, this is where things are. And I'll say, if things have changed, please read this. So it's a very simple read, and, respond back directly if you see any issues. Respond back, just trying to keep people there. I might engage people in just specific activities. For example, I just want you to come to this root cause analysis session. I know you're not a member of the larger team, but just to let that stakeholder see that there are things going on, that this is an important effort, and that they're being involved in the right places. I might have them speak at a kickoff or just come to a kickoff. I love to do that with senior leaders, but sometimes you could do that with Joe from the plant, who has a lot of personal power. Hey, Joe, can you come in and just share with us a couple of words about what this is going to mean to your team or what your group? Special guesting, kind of the same thing at different meetings. A survey. Surveys are invaluable. And one of the ways I found to really make a survey work and get people talking, because my only real reason is to get people talking, and sometimes they're nervous to do it in front of others, is I do a survey before a meeting to ask all the questions that I'm going to ask at the meeting, and it's anonymous. And then I show the answers to the questions in the meeting. And once people see that other people are answering similarly, they'll share stuff. They'll say, oh, yeah, I feel that way. And then you'll see people say, well, I said that. The most controversial line they would never say in person. They say, oh, I said that. And everybody said, oh, you said that. And it just gets so much conversation going. And then just providing various feedback mechanisms for people. whether that's a survey that kind of is just a data repository so that people can share thoughts periodically. And most of us don't anymore drop a comment box, data drop in a comment in a box is good. Maybe if it's a long time frame, it's 60-day pulse survey, 90-day check-in, or things of that sort. So I know I've rambled a whole bunch about engaging stakeholders. Any questions before we move to our virtual activity? Or thoughts? Okay. All right, so I'm going to share. You're going to have to get your phones out. So I'm sure your cellular, as my grandmother would say, cellular phone is not far from you. So you're going to.
Hey, Yuquan.
Yes.
A question, maybe before we get going.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give a few examples of survey questions you have asked to engage stakeholders?
Sure. The most simple of them, I did one for my students last night to see how they liked the first test because it's a virtual class. But I love, what would you stop? What would you start? What would you continue?
Okay.
That's basic about a process. Like if we're about to revamp a process. But if this is a big project effort, how do you feel about the project? What do you think are the biggest risks? I try to make it beneficial for myself too, because I'm always, right, as project managers, we're always trying to minimize risk. What are your concerns with this work? What are you excited about?
Okay.
Just if I could sit down and
ideas,
pretend like I'm asking a person, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. And SurveyMonkey is free up to a certain point. So,
yeah. And as far as administering a survey, has it been your experience that you've done those at the beginning of a project or maybe throughout a project?
Yeah, I have this associate. What do they call these people now? You're a Zennial. You're not a millennial. You're not a Z. She is so serious about surveys. And I was so thankful to her the other day because we were doing a project to try and improve this company's recruiting process because it was taking them 40 days and they wanted to get down to 10. And there were so many complaints about who the problem was within their company. Was it recruiters, the compliance group? Because there's a lot of compliance around. These are for drivers, CDL drivers, or was it the managers? And so she did a survey on what people felt like about the process. Who do they feel like, what parts of the process aren't clear? How do they feel about the departments they work with? She did one at the very start, and then she did one at the very end. I was so thankful that she did that because, there was so much anecdotal information. And of course, I'm meeting with senior leaders and I'm like, let's just look at the survey. And boy, they called out specific departments. I thought, oh, this is kind of telling, but I was so glad to have those real words from real people that they would never said out loud in front of their bosses. They were literally naming names. I felt so uncomfortable, but it's important for them to make that type of change that they're trying to make, that they have that information.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for the additional feedback.
Yes, sir. All right. I'm going to start a Kahoot. If you've ever heard of Kahoot, then you go to kahoot.it and you'll see that shortly. I closed all my browsers before this meeting, so I need to kick it off again. And you'll see, and it's just going to test that you've heard what we talked about, and it'll be in a non-threatening, fun way. When you sign in, it's going to ask you for a name. You can put your real name, you can put a nickname. So I tell my students, just put a name that's screen appropriate. So George, be careful out there. It's I probably should have went from Google, but I went from Bing. So it is building, and it's just about stakeholder management and things that are important for us as we continue in this space. So
And
I think
Quan,
I'm really into the
are you
surveys lately.
intending to share that screen?
I am. In a second, I'm sharing. I'm letting it build on the other screen. Yeah. But yeah, I think people are so much more empowered to tell the truth when they don't have their name attached to it. Another trick I use with surveys is I promise one weird question, and that makes people open it for whatever reason. It's like, and my weird questions are usually SurveyMonkey will give you some, or Google will give you some. If you could only drink water or eat solid food for the rest of your life, which one would you pick? And then you get to figure out who all the alcoholics are. Just little things like that. Just, fun ways to get people to engage. All right. Slowly, here we come. And I hear a little bit of goofy Kahoot music, and I am sharing it in a second. But if you're at kahoot.it, then you'll just have to it's a slow drag. Ugh. The internet, my friend. All right. I'm going to try it one more time, and then if maybe it's not for us, I can just ask you questions. Do you see the screen building slowly that I'm sharing?
It looks like it's doing something. There we go. There we can see it.
All right. All right. If it responds to my mouse, it's now loading a game pin. It's just moving a tad slow. So that's your game pin. If you go to kahoot.it and you place your name in there, I really regret that I didn't go with Chrome on this, but we'll play this out. Oh, I see Samaj, great PM gal, bing, bang, boom. Dave, I almost wanted to say Dave the Jazz Man. All right. I'm going to hope that this works. Shiloh. That's a good nickname, Shiloh. I like that. You can make that a rap name.
Yeah.
Oh, Kahoot thinks his music is horrible. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm going to press start. You're going to see a question. You're going to use your phone as a game controller. You'll see. The first one you probably have to learn from a bit.
Okay.
And the 5 levels of stakeholder engagement are, and you're going to see your choices. That's a hard one with all the words. What you think? I liked oblivious, didn't you? I love the word oblivious. 16 people, and now we're going to see who's leading the pack, because it's also speed. Well, Bing Bang Boom is named appropriately because they're fast. Grandpa, I'm happy to see Grandpa showed up, though. Grandpa's usually, a little bit slower. This is the new age Grandpa, so that's good. Here we go. Most projects will have a blank number of stakeholders. It's kind of implied, not explicit. All right. Diverse was the right answer. That was an interesting one. And I didn't say it explicitly, but they may or may not be supportive, but they're often unknown. So I can see how you could say unknown. Moving on, Grandpa took the lead because grandpas are wise. So next, here we go. The ability of stakeholders to influence the project is typically highest at the like we gained a person. We got 22 answers. Oh, you can't jump in. All right. At the planning. And I kept saying as we start the project, and if you're bringing them in at the right time. So planning is great. If we say initiate, when they have the chance. So this one, if you're like, why did she put that in there like that? I can feel you on that one. And I'm sorry. Because that's I could have took out that one and just made one or the other. But Chu showed up, so that gave Chu a chance. So there we go. And X is up. X is on the move, and so is Tiger. Those are appropriately named. This will be more straightforward. A stakeholder is this was explicitly stated on a slide. Aha, yes. Anyone who can impact or be impacted by the project. All right. Kate. All right, Kate. It's our first time seeing her in the top spot, but Tim is the highest climber. We just don't see him yet, but be aware he's showing up. All right. We only got 2 more. Oh, 3 more. Which of the following is not a stakeholder? It's going to take some inference. Think about the 6 categories of a stakeholder. Very good. A competitor. They're not really a stakeholder. They don't fit in that group. They're not impacted or impacted. They can't impact the project. If you think philosophically, they can be impacted in a deep sense, but we don't typically think of our competitors as our stakeholder, but you could put them out of business. All right, Kate, she held on to her spot, but Jasmine is climbing. So let's see what's next. Which one of the following is the best way to manage stakeholders? You guys are moving so fast now, and I got it where the time has to play because I'm going to change that next time. I really like ensuring they don't get to meet outside of work because that could be the death of you. All right, keeping them informed throughout the project. And last but not least, we got special guest B. I like that name on the screen. Kate's still holding, but we got a couple other people out there with answer streaks. So let's see if she can hold out. The stakeholder engagement level where the stakeholder is actively engaged is known as, this is on that slide of the 5. We had resistant was on there. It's like Nirvana. Leading, that's very good. Now they do need to be supportive, but It's so good when they're leading, they're out there fighting the battle, and you're just making sure that the project happens like it needs to happen. So that's awesome. And last but not least, with SMM taking the lead as we go into the finals. Let's see, question number. A can be determined. And we looked at two different simple spreadsheet ones. It's a hard one, I think, but you're smart. Communication gaps. And I was talking about the tools like we looked at the very end with Batman and Robin and just the spreadsheets. So, that's good though. This is a good question for me to know that I didn't do a good job on communicating that. So let's see who's leading. It's probably whoever answered that last one right. With 6 out of 8, we have Ashley S. on the podium. With another 6 out of 8, but faster at the draw, we have Kate. And the fastest of the 6 out of 8 is SMM. All right, with Jasmine and Chu as close runners up. All right, thank you for playing along with that. The most difficult questions, because you gotta look at the data. The ability of stakeholders to influence the project is typically highest at. A stakeholder tool can be used to determine the communication, and most projects will have a blank amount of stakeholders. So if these are really important to me, then the next time I speak, I need to really stress those a little bit better. So yeah, way to use it as an analysis tool. Somebody needs to get SMM a prize. Yes.
This is awesome. That was a fun way to help reinforce the message. Hey, there's a question about, is the Survey Monkey the best format you have used for surveys? Or what other methods have you found success with?
Yeah, I've only played with Survey Monkey. When I was at Coca-Cola, they started rolling out a tool called Qualtrics. And but they are trying to like lead their like assessment of employees and managers using Qualtrics. It's like these surveys. You get a survey every month. You say how you feel about your associate or your boss, and it does some behind the scene things, and it triggers all kinds of HR processes. But I've only really played with SurveyMonkey because at first it was free for me until they hooked me in. But I'm sure there are some other good things out there. I like it because I even can customize the back end of my URL, and it makes it look like I created a special URL for just for that project or that set of questions. And I think it makes people pay attention, and it tracks so many things. Anybody else got any good ones they like?
If anyone else has survey tools that they've used, yeah, put it in the chat or the Q&A. I see there's both conversations going on in both. So
okay, cool beans.
Google Forms is another option.
I use Google Forms on my website, I believe, to capture information from people. I do like how pretty SurveyMonkey will turn it around and make the data, and I can export it, or so yeah.
And then there's also a Microsoft Forms that is another option.
I haven't been smart enough to use that, Tammy. I tried it a couple times. I'm like, what? So, that's good. All right. But yeah, and even you see, I started using Kahoot periodically only because I was teaching at night. I was teaching 20-year-olds from 7 to 9 p.m. And I thought, I got to find a way to engage them. But surveys are great for staying in touch with customers, stakeholders, and knowing what they really think. But feedback is a gift, and you might not really want to know what they think, but you gotta know. Any questions about any of the things that we talked about today? I know we're getting close to our time, other than anything we've said or shared, talked about. All right. Which truly my message was, we all understand the basics of change management, and we know that it's important, but sometimes it's the gaps, it's the blind spots that get us. And so we have to be explicit with laying out who our customers are in a way that other people can interact with it and call out those gaps for you. Because often we're working at places where we don't know everything and everybody, and we can't rely on ourselves. And so we have to be able to find a way to get other people to share things with us.
Excellent. Well, Yuquan, we are almost at the top of the hour. Great. I was going to just say contact information. So I see you're on the LinkedIn page. You've got a link for the newsletter. And again, folks, we'll share this presentation out with you so you can actually get the content that Yuquan is sharing here. Thank you again, Yuquan, on behalf of the membership of the Western Idaho chapter of the PMI. We appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with stakeholder management.
Thank you. I always enjoy you guys, and some of you are now my friends on LinkedIn. So thank you for being my friend.
Oh,
that's how I found out Cheryl was retired. I was like, what? So it's the only way I can keep up with Idaho.
And I just became a grandpa in the past year, so
congratulations. I was just telling one of my stakeholders who's just so high energy and out of control. He's about to be a grandpa. I was like, I can't wait. It's going to mellow you out. He's like, you think?
It gives you a different perspective for sure.
I can't wait.
All right. You're getting a lot of thank yous in the notes. So thanks again.
Thank you, guys.
And again, team, watch your email in the next several days. We'll be sharing the content out of the chapter email address. So be watching for that. Thanks again, everybody.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye. Go Dogs. I'll whisper it. Go Dogs. I don't say it too loud. I don't want people to know.